Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on 2020 Trends in Corporate Social Responsibility. My name is Panita Khanna, and I am the Director of Community Relations at Dr. Susan Love Foundation for Breast Cancer Research. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, I would like to take an opportunity to introduce you to our organization. Dr. Susan Love Foundation challenges the status quo to end breast cancer through innovative research and improve the lives of people impacted through education and advocacy. We drive collaborative, cutting-edge research with non-traditional partners, shed light on the collateral damage of treatment, and actively seek ways to diminish it, and interpret science to empower breast cancer patients. We cannot do this work alone. As a nonprofit organization, our work inspires individuals, corporations, and foundations to join us in our breast cancer initiatives. Building connections with individuals and organizations is a hallmark of community relations. Today's topic is discussing the role of corporate social responsibility in nonprofit development strategy. Between October as Breast Cancer Awareness Month, Giving Tuesday on December 1st, and year-end giving, this season inspires many organizations to secure and promote corporate partnerships as a means of increasing visibility and incentivizing nonprofit giving. Our panel today consists of nonprofit industry experts who will offer a glimpse into the types of partnerships that benefit their organizations, as well as the decision-making process of corporations interested in social enterprise. And with that, I would like to introduce our panelists. Stacy Lewis, Chief Program Officer, Deputy Chief Executive, Young Survival Coalition. Jayla Burton, Program Officer at Breast Cancer Action. Suzanne Griffith, Founder and Managing Principal of Vega Partners. Maria Castro, Regional External Affairs Manager at Comcast. Welcome, everyone. Today's webinar will be recorded and will be sent to our attendees within 2 business days and will also be available on our website. Our panelists will be available to answer questions from our viewers at the end of the webinar. So please submit your questions using the Q&A box, indicating if there is a specific person you wish to direct your question to. While we will try and answer as many questions as possible, please note that we may not be able to address every question today. I would like to start things off by asking all of our panelists about their organization's approach in aligning themselves with corporate partners or nonprofit organizations. Companies that engage in corporate social responsibility want to ensure that there are positive social effects with the way their business operates. For this, they look to align themselves with causes that are relevant to them. This year, our foundation received an unprecedented number of inquiries from companies wishing to partner with us for Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And we developed a campaign promoting these affiliations to our supporters, thus increasing visibility for our partners, raising awareness and essential funding for breast cancer research. However, every organization has a different approach towards corporate social responsibility. So Stacy, can you share what the criteria is for Young Survival Coalition to engage with corporate partners?
Absolutely, and thank you, Punita, for having me. Thank you for hosting this interesting and timely conversation and for inviting me as a representative of YSC to sit on such a distinguished and beautiful panel. I'll provide a little bit of background about YSC, which can be found at youngsurvival.org, and then move into our criteria and interests for engaging with corporate partners. YSC is focused on identifying and meeting the unique needs of the young adult breast cancer population. So a very unique population in that the median age of diagnosis of our community is about 33. I've been on staff at YSC for over 15 years and currently enjoy the privilege of serving as the Chief Program Officer and Deputy Chief Executive. And over time, YSC has enjoyed some thriving partnerships with both large and small corporations. Regardless of the size of the corporation or the partner, our criteria applies across the board. And it includes, does the company produce any products that are known carcinogens? Are there existing mission-based synergies, which is critical as a nonprofit organization? I often refer to us as a social profit organization. We are really here to benefit a component of society, and we want to make sure that there are synergies between YSC and our potential partners. Is the social profit as a social profit organization, how will this relationship really benefit YSC and those we serve? Will YSC be able to educate and engage the partners community, is also a very important criteria or metric. And will this partnership potentially hinder YSC's ability to deliver on mission, or as importantly, will it negatively impact YSC's brand? Those are just some of the high level considerations we undertake. We take partnership very seriously. We want there to be mutual respect, and we want to make sure that we're engaging in partnerships that are really going to be mutual beneficial across the board.
Well, thank you, Stacy. Jayla, Breast Cancer Action has strict guidelines for engaging with partners. Can you describe those guidelines and how they serve your mission?
Of course, Punita, and thank you for inviting Breast Cancer Action to be on this panel today. And I'll just give you a little bit of a background of who we are as an organization and then our unique conflict of interest policy. So Breast Cancer Action, we've positioned ourselves as the watchdogs for the breast cancer movement. And our mission is to achieve health justice for women living with and at risk of breast cancer. So we've been doing this work for 30 years thus far. And so we're really committed to ensuring our education and activist work is conducted with the utmost high integrity and without bias of corporate influence, which is why we have worked on and established a very unique conflict of interest policy that we've been using since the beginning of when we started this work. And our conflict of interest policy states that we do not accept any money from companies or industries that contribute to or profit from breast cancer. And specific examples of these industries include pharmaceutical companies, biotech companies, alcohol and tobacco companies, oil and gas companies, and those are just to name a few. And so this allows us to maintain independence in the work that we do and stay devoted to our mission, all while building trust with our community and our members and inspiring individuals to give donations more generously.
Well, thank you, Jayla. So we now go for a global conversation. Suzanne, in your consulting work with corporations, how is criteria established for your clients as they seek to partner with nonprofit organizations?
Thank you, Punita, and welcome everyone. I am pleased to be here with this panel. So Vega Partners is a social impact consulting firm. Part of what we do is work with companies on their corporate social responsibility program. We're very interdisciplinary, so we work with clients who are also operating nonprofits, much like the ones Stacy and Jayla has referenced, foundations, philanthropic grant-making organizations, and higher ed or government entities. When we're talking about CSR with a client, what we really sort of try to underscore is authenticity in action. And so in starting with that sort of ethos and framework, we're going to support and guide and help them interrogate what are they really trying to get at. rather than just make it a PR scheme that you are aligning for the National Month of X, right? Throwing up a pink ribbon and then being able to just sort of push that through media. So from a strategic perspective, that's really what we're going to interrogate for. Obviously, companies are in the business of making a profit, and it is from those profits that they're able to do greater and broader social good. So, there's not we understand, right, the intersection that good can be greater. And so that's sort of how we help guide and get to that discussion around what is the strategic intent? How does that align with, corporate imperatives, which for different industries and different companies will change over time. But fundamentally, authenticity in action.
Thank you, Suzanne. Maria, corporate social responsibility is embedded in Comcast's mission. And can you share with us what drives Comcast's strategic initiatives?
So thank you, Punita, for having me today, and certainly the Susan G. Love Foundation as well, and to my panelists as well. So Comcast, has been around for many years, as people know us as the Comcast Communications Corporation. However, lately it seems that we have a bigger need than we do anything else. And for us, our mission is pretty simple. We have always said that we are a communications company, and as such, we really try hard to bridge the digital divide that we currently have in this country. And it has really been so pronounced to us when we think about what the needs are in the communities. And so although we're focused on looking at bridging the digital divide with all of our nonprofits in the area, we also have recognized, especially this year with the social unrest and with the pandemic and everything else that has hit us all at once this year, that there needs to be a broader scale of how we're going to put emphasis in our dollars and our media behind us to help the greater good. And so that being said, Comcast has recently announced that we will be giving $100 million within the next 3 years to help with the social impact that has taken place within our, underprivileged communities, our businesses. We've also recognized that, with the fact that we have the capability with our media side to help people promote themselves and to get their businesses going again, that those dollars are completely different than the foundation dollars that we currently have, that we have committed already to the partners that we have in the communities at large. So, the dollars that we have now committed for 100 million are not going to be taken away from the foundation dollars that we have already committed to using to our nonprofits that do bridge the digital divide. So I think, we all have a responsibility. We all have things that have to get done within this next year going into 2021. And I think that in terms of what we as a company are doing, we're certainly making sure that the impact that we make within the next 3 years with those committed dollars are really going to be going toward the communities of color. So very excited about that.
Well, thank you. Let's talk about this year. So 2020 has been a very unusual year, to say the least, not only due to the pandemic, but also the civil unrest, heightened awareness of social injustice and equity in all areas, including access to health care. And then can each of you share with us your organization's policies or the relationships you developed for them that were impacted by these unprecedented circumstances? And Suzanne, your work with different organizations and across sectors, can you provide an overview of what you saw occurring with corporate partnerships and nonprofits as a result of this change in our environment this year?
Are you starting with me then, or the first question?
Yes, go ahead, Suzanne.
Sure.
Both.
So unsurprisingly, I think, everyone on this call will, concur that what we saw with the new moment, if you will, around racial reckoning, it's not a new idea in this country, but there's a new shade to it this time, right? Is that maybe the peer pressure, the imperative to launch your Black Lives Matter flag, to, make a statement or make an investment, because you seemingly understand the historic inequities that COVID brought to light, because they were already there. And there were already organizations who would argue that they had been working on those issues, but it certainly did have to, lever up for a lot of organizations. So I don't know that I have anything new to add to this question that you guys don't already know. The health crisis created an economic crisis, which exacerbated an economic and health crisis that was already underway in many, many communities of color. It brought a different national attention to it. And so it became du jour to have to talk about it every day. It did provoke for some people in their consciousness that they had to deal with it on a daily basis in a way that they could not anymore. So I think that was probably the biggest change. And in such a PR marketing driven world that we live in, when we all retreated into our home offices, it also meant we retreated into more social media. There was intense peer pressure, right? To have to say something. And, the memes that said, if you stayed silent, it meant you were complicit, all of those kinds of things. The danger of that, of course, is that people started saying lots of things with really no substance or sincerity behind it. And I think we're still grappling with the aftermath of that. So, for those organizations, and we had quite a few who reached out to us to provide some guidance, to, test if their instinct was right, to ask if these are the right words to say, could they legitimately say what they were thinking or not thinking? Could they stay silent even? These were some of the inquiries that we got. And again, I return to authenticity in action. Rather than falsely make this a moment to sort of, raise the Black flag, it really meant that the organization needed to reflect on where they had been and maybe do some initial work to be sincere and true about whether they were going to start increasing their consciousness around this, how that might shift their operations, their programmatic focus, how they may intersect the work differently than they had not intentionally thought about before. So we are experiencing a surge in medium and small sized companies who, really want to tackle the notion of corporate social responsibility for the first time in a structured way, which I think is wonderful. And then for nonprofit organizations who are now having to grapple with how they deliver their services or think about their services and those that they serve a little bit differently and in many more nuanced ways. So I'll pause there because,
Great. Thank you. And Maria, Comcast, large corporation, and how did they respond this year to the various challenges, and how were the nonprofit relationships affected?
Sure, thank you. So to that question, I have to say, so many of our nonprofits certainly have had to deal with a lot, closing their doors, some of them certainly doing business very, very differently. And so we have had to also look at how we're delivering our goods. Obviously, our services in terms of internet and things, we have had a program called Internet Essentials for the past 8 years that has really been a game changer for a lot of our low income families. And so this year, because of the pandemic, we found that people couldn't even afford that. It became, the $9.95, they couldn't even do that. It was either that or give their kids to eat. And so we had to come up with a free program for them, which we have. And it also prompted us to look at a sponsored service, which meant that we could go to organizations that had technology grants already, use those dollars to put them towards sponsored services, which meant that they can actually sponsor families. So perhaps, they have, in the case of the Chicago Public Schools, they had, hundreds of families that weren't able to pay that $9.95. And so now they're on a sponsored program through, Chicago Public Schools, and they're able to get on as a family, and there's a 3-year commitment for them. So they get to be on that service, although they don't have to pay for it now. The school will pay for it, and also with some other school districts around the country that are doing the same thing. We also had to come up with a way to also our nonprofits that were unfortunately hit with more and more students coming to their facilities and using their Wi-Fi being, the most important thing that they have right now to run their particular nonprofits. We have started a Lift Zone program, and that also enables our nonprofits, even if they're not our customers, that we will put in a Wi-Fi system that can actually take the overload of, the people that are coming in to use their facilities, whether they're students or just people in general that are looking for jobs and things. So we've changed a whole lot of, the program that it used to be, so that we could actually help these organizations that now need more support in ways that we never even thought were possible. So we've had to really take a look at what we're doing, and we have done that, quite frankly, in a big way. And I'm really proud to say that so many of our nonprofits are being able to sustain the people that are coming there, and able to help a lot of students in the case of, them actually having to be the school now, rather than the kids being in school. They're going to these nonprofits that are a safe place for them. So, we're looking at every avenue that we can, but, in regards to that as well, we have our media side, the NBC Universal side. And so here locally in Chicago, we are working with NBC5 and Telemundo Chicago to absolutely, help some of our nonprofits get the word out about what they're doing and how they can help the communities at large.
So we turn to our breast cancer organizations. Jayla, how was your conflict of interest policy? How did that serve as your umbrella and allowed you to stay true to the mission of your organization during this time?
Yeah, so I would say because of the conflict of interest policy that we have, I guess a lot of our funding wasn't as impacted from what was going on in the world, which is a benefit. But I would say that it did help us develop stronger partnerships with other health justice, environmental justice, social change organizations. And we saw a lot more mobilization, organizing, and a lot more work being done within all of our nonprofits. And also another big point to that is there was a lot of shifting in programmatic priorities for a lot of us as well. And a lot of this was done under limited capacity. And so all of that to say, it was really actually nice to see a shift of responsibility from individuals that are holding corporations accountable to organizations that are holding corporations, industries accountable for the role that they play and the culture that they create, and why it's important to work for systematic change and calling those things out, like Suzanne was saying.
And Stacy, as a result of these unprecedented times, how did the approach taken by Young Survival Coalition in working with corporate partners change this year?
Well, I think to the points that my fellow panelists raised, certainly this year is one very unique, and one I'm sure we all hope we can put way in the past. The pandemic presented a devastating blow to YSC, to the nonprofit sector, and to the community that we serve. And at the same time, the need for YSC services, support, education resources exponentially increased, while revenue, primarily from individual donors, significantly decreased. And having established corporate relationships certainly proved beneficial during this time, as those that were in a financial position to increase their support did so without hesitation. And I think that that is the value of relationship, because there was already trust, there's already knowledge, and it really provided for us some life-saving opportunity as an organization. And others, just like YSC, there are other corporations that are still struggling, and therefore they're not able to contribute. And at the same time, you have this merger of what is considered social justice, this health crisis that has been existing, and a social injustice, a health injustice for many, many years. So while there's so many negative attributes to the pandemic, I will give it a slight nod for at least increasing the visibility of the health injustices in particular. And being in the breast cancer community, where women of color have been dying at such a significant rate comparative to their white counterparts, if there's anything that we can do or take any opportunity to elevate that profile, certainly YSC wants to work with its corporate partners to do so. And I think that one of the points that Suzanne raised, she used the term de jure. And one of the challenges of this time from a nonprofit perspective is that social justice and work focusing on health equities or health inequities is now de jure. And so while for many organizations, they're finding a way to fit into a corporation's niche that is providing funds for this type of work. What I also found interesting is just as organizations like YSC have been consistently focused on our communities of color, young women, African-American women in particular, have a higher incidence rate of breast cancer. And so, we've been focused on that population, and yet as we engage with some of our corporate partners, if our program is not specifically pulled out, if we don't pull that part of our programming out in a way that fits into their niche, we unfortunately don't get that funding. So I think it's an interesting dynamic that is happening as we look at the pandemic, the relationships, the impact of relationships, the highlight awareness of health inequities and social injustice, and as it all comes together. So again, kudos to you, Punita, for this panel, because I think it's such an interesting conversation amongst diverse thinkers and engagers.
So let's look to the future. With all of that as laid as our foundation and what we all experienced in the past, while none of us can predict the lingering effects that COVID-19 may have on our economy or the effects due to the heightened attention to social injustices, what changes do you foresee in the types of partnerships that organizations will develop? And I'll leave this open-ended. So does someone want to start with this?
I'll start. So, obviously none of us can predict what the future is going to hold. I mean, Thanksgiving is going to look different. Christmas is going to look different. I mean, there's just going to be, it's going to be a different world. But what I can say is that as I look into the future and what I see from the community investment side is hope. There are so many nonprofits out there right now that I deal with personally on a regular basis that have a tremendous amount of hope in the people that are out there that are supporting them now. We look at our employee resource groups, for instance, and I thought about you, Stacy, when you were saying that people have, kind of pulled back because they don't have the funding anymore for certain programs. But you have your employee resource groups, and I know for ours, we have many. We have our Asian Pacific group, we have our women's group, we have our LGBT groups and things. And each of them has, a couple of them have missions, right? And so I look at breast cancer, since we're talking about that today, and our women's group, they do provide support to breast cancer groups. They do provide support to domestic violence groups and things like that, because that's meaningful to them. So I think we're going to start looking at things differently in terms of what we do. And in terms of like the dollars that we're going to put out there, they certainly are going to look different, because we are looking obviously at social impact now. We are looking at our business community at large. I mean, especially in the communities of color, where they have been disproportionately hit so hard with the pandemic, with the social unrest and things. So a lot of what we're doing is we are looking into all the different ways that we as a company are going to have to make sure that we are covering and helping these businesses who have been customers of ours. We have to help them to get through this. And so I think as we look into the future, I see a lot of hope. I see a lot of people who certainly have never really thought about how they can get help from the local, cable/internet company, but they can. And so our emphasis is going to be very different, and yet it's still going to be the same, because we are never going to take those dollars away from the impact that we're making with our smaller nonprofits, as much as we're going to give more media and more dollars to the business side of things, to the nonprofit side of things that we hadn't in the past. So I'm very hopeful, and I don't have a pair of rose-colored glasses on, but I certainly think that for us, we're going to certainly make a huge impact going forward, and I'm really proud of that.
And Maria, I believe that Comcast is looking at additional partnerships with millennials. Would you want to
Yes.
share some of that initiative? Because I think that's important. I mean, we look at our corporate partnerships, but you're also looking to train and expand the next generation and
We
get them on
are,
board.
and I think thank you, that's a great point. We have had to really take a look at, big look at what the millennials are doing. They are our future. They are the people who are going to be the decision makers, the leaders in the country, and certainly going to be upfront about what they don't want and what they do want. And so that being said, a lot of emphasis is being put on the millennial groups, and we're really counting on them to come back to us and say, that just isn't going to work. This is something that we, think that we can do this with or that with. So our emphasis is really going to be on making sure that we are listening, that we are, really truly putting our money where our mouth is. And so if we say we're going to change, we're going to be the change, that we are going to help the communities with what they need. The millennials are going to be the key to that, because they certainly have a seat at the table now at many companies. They certainly have a different ideal of, even for myself, I have two sons who are entrepreneurs. And so when I bounce things off of them, I have to really sit and listen and make sure that I understand exactly what I'm missing, because they're very honest, they're very, straightforward, and they are going to tell you exactly what it is that they see is going to be a need for our communities, and that business, especially small businesses, a lot of our millennials are in business for themselves now. And so there's going to be a huge shift. There's going to be a huge difference in how anyone is doing business now if they are not listening to our millennials out there.
Any other thoughts for the upcoming year?
I can certainly jump on the bandwagon of hope. I always feel that is a good place to be. I can only hope as both a society as well as a representative of a nonprofit organization often serving that millennial community, is that we each continue to walk into the new year and hopefully a better season with a sense of innovation and exploring opportunities to collaborate that we've not necessarily considered in the past. And so while we would never want to put aside our criteria, I do think that we would all want to come in as better listeners, whether it be the nonprofit organization or the corporation, to come in as better listeners, and all with a sense of innovation, and as to how can we continue to collaborate to better our society?
I can also jump in here. Like I said, I don't know what's going to come out of this. I don't know what's going to happen. Christmas, January 1st, January 20th. It's all up in the air. But what I can foresee, I think for me, it's yes, I have hope. But I also have this feeling that organizations, individuals are going to hold companies to a bit of a higher standard than they have been held to in the past. And I think that's going to be done in a way that's done through partnerships, a way that's done through communications. And also I think the partnerships are gonna demand a little bit more like accountability and transparency as well. And so I'm very interested to see what that work looks like. I know it's affected breast cancer actions campaigns this year. Usually, so each year we have like a Think Before You Pink, which is our annual campaign that happens in the month of October. We've called out like Ford Motor Company, Baker Hughes, oil and gas company. And this year we were able to like up the ante and call out the federal government. And I don't think we would have been able to do that without the energy that was going on right now. And so I just see that work moving forward for not only us as an organization, but any organization that's representing patients, the needs of marginalized communities, et cetera. So yeah.
So I guess I'll jump in and bring up the rear. I don't have a crystal ball either, but I will say that I am encouraged and I'm excited about innovation. I think that in extraordinarily challenging times like this, right, the overuse, unprecedented, uncertainty that we all are living with right now is kind of the je ne sais quoi that helps to create new innovation and new ways of just sort of seeing things. What's encouraging to me about this moment, though, is, and what will come from this, is a new kind of synthesis. So what I mean by that is the ways in which we work have changed dramatically, and we have adapted very, very quickly, considering that we're human beings. And I think that we'll continue to adapt. And in that adaptation, there's just new things that are going to come from that. It creates a challenge right now for nonprofits who are concerned about their revenue sources, excuse me, and how quickly they can adapt, but they're doing it. It creates a challenge for major companies and small companies, right, whose workforces are now really decentralized, and we worry about connectivity and the serendipity that occurs because there are 50 people moving around in an office, and I know I'll see you tomorrow, and it'll spark an idea and those kinds of things. And so I'm encouraged because we are going to go back to a world where we're able to see people in person. And we're going to be hungry for all of that connection that we have not been able to take advantage of. So I'm really, sort of inspired and encouraged by how organizations have found ways to pivot their programming, their strategies, their direction. And then we have to now make another pivot, right? So we are all craving this idea of normal, but intellectually we know we're not returning to a time that it was before. We are actually going into a new time that we have yet to experience. And we will have to design what that looks like. And it is in those moments, these concentrated moments of challenge, that I think, we see a lot more innovation, new approaches, new ways of working and collaborating with each other. And so I'm really encouraged by the synthesis of what's going to come from that.
So thank you all. And at this time, I'd like to take some time to have our panelists answer questions from our viewers. So here we have a general question that can be answered by any or all. What are some ways nonprofits can avoid embracing diversity and a commitment to social justice as just a trend or flavor of the month? What are some general steps that can be taken to make sure it is fully integrated into the mission?
So I'll start. I'll start by saying that it's not a general approach, and that if you are, you know, truly interested in doing this work, you have to be prepared for long, sustained, deep work. Our firm has been inundated with requests for this work in the last year or so, and we expect to see that continue. But we turn away organizations that where we suspect that this is about checking a box. This is about rewriting a statement and being able to post that, and that the organization and its leaders are not really interested in, you know, the deep sustained work. For many organizations that have been working in a default position, what it takes to make that shift, right, is a lot of work by individual leaders. So, you know, it's not a generalized approach. There is not a checkbox. There is not a template that you somehow slap onto an organization and then rebrand yourself as equitable and inclusive.
Well said. I think what I would add, just thinking about YSC as an organization a number of years ago took on some of that hard work and really looking at itself and looking at the community that we are designed to serve and identifying where the gaps are. And so from a lot of that assessment, we developed a diversity, health, equity, and inclusion plan. And to Suzanne's point, it is a multi-year strategy. And it is a lot of trial and error. And I think that that is going to continue. And I think it continues with a sense of enthusiasm, because ultimately we as a nonprofit want to be there for all young adults diagnosed with breast cancer. So, socioeconomically, geographically, racially, ethnically, etc. We want to be there. And if you want to be there, then you have to put in that work, sustained work, difficult work, and sometimes work that is not easy to get funded. But it is important to truly then be able to reflect and read and stand on an organizational mission that says you're going to be there for all of whatever your community may be. So I think that long sustaining innovation are all going to play important parts.
And I'll jump in on that as well, because, I'm privileged to work with so many incredible nonprofit organizations here in the Chicago area. And I have to say that I have been extremely impressed with how quickly they have been able to adjust, with smaller staff, with more need, more demand. They have come through, and they are always asking us, for our input. They'll throw things out there and say, so if we do things this way, is it something that you would be interested in funding? If not, why not? They come to us with different ideas. They come to us, with different, it seems like lately, especially, they come to us with different ideals in terms of what they see as their nonprofit going forward. But in terms of the work, the hard work, the roll up your sleeves and CEO jump in and have to answer the phones, they're doing it. And I think that a lot of them that will survive are the ones who are doing the hard work, that know that this is going to be a long-term effect that they're going to have on their organization, and that they're not going to give up, because they're looking at the people that they serve. They're looking at the need within those communities. And they know that without these particular organizations doing what they do, the community is going to suffer. So I'm proud of the work that I see them doing, whether it's with people with disabilities or with, domestic violence, which has really gone through the roof right now, with people sheltering in place. Unfortunately, that seems to be the biggest need right now that I have seen, is our domestic violence organizations that are overwhelmed. don't have enough volunteers, don't have enough beds for the families that are coming in that need to be served. And as such, have really figured out ways to coordinate with, other organizations that might have beds that are available for services that they don't do right now. So it's a challenge for sure. But I think that, again, I come back to the word hope. I think that I see the hope that all these different organizations are stepping up in a big way and are really preparing for what's to come, even though it's unknown. They're really preparing, and I'm proud to say that, all of the ones that I deal with on a regular basis really get it. And I think they'll survive.
Thank you for that. So we have one final question before we wrap up for today. In this historic election, both President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris have personal ties to cancer. And what increases in partnerships do you hope their administration will foster? Jayla, we know that Kamala Harris's mother has a personal connection to breast cancer action. Do you have any?
Yeah. So basically, we think that it's going to take a lot more, right, than what we think it's going to take. And I think with President-elect Biden and President-elect Harris, that we have to move forward in continuing to work for and push for and advocate for a lot of different policies that are going to put forth and prioritize health, not only for breast cancer patients, but for everyone. There's been, throughout the last 4 years, there's been reversals of environmental regulations. The standards for safety regulations have been, kind of broken down. And so before we can even get to, I think, those partnerships, we have to work on rebuilding that and holding them accountable and making sure that they're not just saying, okay, we have these personal ties to cancer, but okay, what does that look like when it comes to the policies that are going to be presented in the next 4 years? And I think once we address those policies that will improve women's health, that will improve the health of people that live with breast cancer, women that are at risk of breast cancer, then we will see corporations and institutions and industries kind of follow the lead. And so that's what we are kind of looking to do at Breast Cancer Action is not just settle, but really push and be critical of, what's going on federally. And I think whatever will go on federally will kind of set a precedent for what goes on within, these partnerships that we have. And it will really change. I'm hoping, this is what I have hoped for. I know it's not going to happen overnight. This is something that can take a decade. But I'm hoping that, the new administration that's going to come in at the beginning of next year will be able to kind of lay the roadblocks for those policies that will then lead the way to more enhanced and meaningful strategic partnerships.
So thank you. We're out of time today. And I thank all the panelists for their participation and the audience for joining us. If you have any questions that were not answered today or would like to get in touch with the Foundation about partnerships, please email info@drsusanloveresearch.org. Today's webinar has been recorded and will soon be posted to our website, which is linked in the chat box for your convenience. I also encourage you to visit our website if you are interested in learning more about our partnership opportunities. Thank you to all the panelists who shared their unique perspective of corporate social responsibility, and hope all of you are staying safe and healthy. Thank you.